3.3, adding positive and negative numbers. Ta-da! All right, first write down your rules. Rules to add numbers with the same sign. That means they're both positive or they're both negative. Just add their absolute values and keep the sign. So, two positive numbers, you've been doing this for years. You just add them and you keep it positive. You didn't even realize you were probably doing that. So 8.01, also known as 8 and 1/100th, plus 4 and 2/10. Make sure you line up your decimals when you add. The absolute value of this is 8 and 1/100th. The absolute value of this is 4 and 2/10. You add those together, you get 12 and 20/100ths. You keep the sign, which is a positive, and you are done. Easy. Negative 33 and negative 12, if you follow the directions, it says take the absolute value of negative 33, which is 33, the absolute value of negative 12, which is just 12, add those together, you get 45, and then keep their sign, which is a negative. So it's a negative 45. Now let's think about why this is true. Why is this a negative 45? I always love the football analogy. You have a 33-yard loss and you have a negative 12-yard loss. Well, what do you have? You have a negative 45-yard loss. The temperature drops 33 degrees and it drops another 12 degrees. You've dropped 45 degrees. All right, next rule. To add numbers with opposite signs, that means one's positive and one's negative, you actually subtract their absolute values and keep the sign of the number with a greater absolute value. So, negative 19 and 52. I like to almost think of it as I have a negative 19 and I have a positive 52. Do I have more positives or more negatives? Well, the 52 is more of them, so I'm going to think if I have more positives. So it says take their absolute values, which would be 19 and 52, subtract them. Remember, you take the bigger number and subtract the smaller number. So if you need to, you could always just write it out, 52 minus 19. Okay, borrow, blah, blah, blah. You get your 3, you get your 3, 33. Great. Now, do I have more positives or more negatives? I have more positives, and so my answer is positive. This says, and keep the sign with a greater absolute value. 52 has a greater absolute value. It is positive, therefore that is why my answer is positive. Negative 50 and 6. Absolute value is 50, absolute value is 6. Subtract them because they have opposite signs. I get 44. And then the greater absolute value is the 50. It is negative, so the answer is negative. Again, I like to think of it as, do I have more negatives or more positives? I have 50 negatives, I have a 50-yard loss, and then a 6-yard gain. Okay, if you want to go football. So I actually have more of a loss. I lend someone $50, they only repay me $6. How much of a loss do I have? $44 loss. Great. 14 and negative 20. What do you think? Hopefully you said negative 6. The reasoning behind it, again, absolute value is 14, absolute value is 20. Subtract, I get 6. I have more negatives, so the answer is a negative 6. Wow! 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 So, let's try one more example. What value of the variable makes the statement true? We've got this equation. We want to build a fence so that we can get the x by itself. You have negative 18 plus x equals negative 4. What's attached to the x? The negative 18. I want to get rid of it, so I want to do the inverse of negative 18, which is plus 18. Plus 18. That makes 0. I'm left with a positive x. Great. Now, what's a negative 4 plus 18? We just discussed this. Do I have more positives or more negatives? I have more positives. One's positive, one's negative, so I subtract them. I get 14. More positive, so this is a positive 14. Let's check. All right, my original problem was negative 18 plus x, which is now a 14. Does this, in fact, equal negative 4? Well, what's negative 18 and 14? I have a positive and a negative. They're opposite signs, so I subtract. Do I have more positives or more negatives? I have more negatives. This does equal negative 4, so check. Awesome. Number 2, start building your fence. Here's my variable in x. I want to get it by itself. What's attached to it? 10.8. What's the inverse of 10.8? We're going to subtract it because it's being added, so we want to subtract it now. If I subtract 10.8 and subtract 10.8, this will simplify out to a 0. I will be left with x equals, And now I have a negative 15 and a negative 10 and 8/10. They're both negative. Same sign, add them together. I add them together, I get 25 and 8/10. Does it become positive or negative? Well, think logically. I have negative 15 on the number line and negative 10.8 more. So I'm going further and further into the negatives. So yeah, this will also be a negative. Great. Let's see if it's correct. If I have 10.8 plus, and now my new value of the variable is negative 25.8. Does it in fact equal negative 15? Well, yes, I have a positive and negative. So I'm going to actually subtract those because they're going opposite directions on the number line. If I subtract them, I take this from that, I'll be left with 15, and I have more negatives, so that's negative 15, which equals negative 15. Check.